high level description of functionality. Okay. Basically, test scenario tells us what exactly is the functionality here, or what we need to test. Test case tells us the exact steps that we need to follow in order to test a particular functionality. One test scenario might contain multiple test cases, but not vice versa. Okay. Sorry for that. Now, focus. Test is single aspect or condition, encompasses multiple related test cases. As I mentioned earlier, test scenario can contain multiple test cases depending upon the requirement for which the test scenario has been created. Okay, like we discussed in our previous class. If there is a requirement to test the login button, there might be multiple test cases, like login with username and password or login with Google. But if there is a scenario to test the home page button, then there would be only one test case. On clicking the home button, user should be redirected to the home page itself. So that test scenario contains only one test case. Okay. So are we clear
Okay.
on the difference between the test scenario and test case, and one
Yes,
scenario having multiple test cases or single test case? Correct?
correct.
Yes. Now, moving to the next point, identification has a unique identifier. Okay. As we had discussed earlier, that if we, whenever we try to execute any test cases, we need to give them unique IDs just to make sure that we are able to keep track of them for our future references. Because if few test cases are failing, we would be able to at least just point it out that these test cases were failing. We have created an issues for these test cases, and as soon as the issues are fixed, we need to test those test cases. Retest those test cases. For test scenarios, often identified by the descriptive title itself. As you know that we do not generally test the test scenario. Test scenario basically is a descriptive title, and we use test scenario just to make sure that each and every aspect of that test scenario is covered in its respective test cases itself. Okay, that is for the identification purpose here. Are we clear on the test case and test scenario identification?
Yes,
Okay, thank you. Now moving to the next point, purpose. Sorry. Purpose, detailed verification of small unit, provides context for group of test cases. As we discussed earlier, test cases generally points to a particular use case of that functionality, or you can say that scenario. That's why it gives the detailed verification. In the test cases, you will be having all the test steps, like how we would be executing it. Okay. And for test scenarios, they generally give us a context, how exactly or what exactly we are trying to test. Now, coming to the next point, granularity, very specific and focused. Now, for test case, for test scenarios, more general and covers a broader functionality. As test scenarios are generally linked with the requirement itself, so their scope covers a greater area, or they have broader functionality in itself. But whenever we are writing test cases, we try to find out the very basic functionality or the very basic feature that we need to test for that functionality. And we try to write the test cases for that individual functionality or that part of the functionality itself. So for granularity, test cases are focused and specific, but test scenarios, they are basically general. They are more of a general kind of thing. You won't get an exact idea by reading the test scenario. What exactly are we trying to test? You'll get an idea of what exam no no you'll be able to get the idea of what we are testing, not how we are testing that by reading the test scenario. But for test case itself, you would be getting the idea on reading it, what we are how we will be testing this particular functionality. Okay. Test scenario gives us what we would test, and test case gives us how we would be testing it. Are we clear? Everyone is silent, then I guess we are okay with it.
Yes.
Hmm. Now, content. The test case has the following content: test steps, input, expected result, etc. For test scenario is going to be high level description related test cases. As we had already discussed, what exactly do a test case consist of? First, test steps. It's gonna give us a detailed list of steps that we need to follow in order to execute that test case. Like if we try to give an example of login functionality test case through email address and password field. Now, what would be the test step? The step one. Step one would be enter the email in the username. Correct? That would be our first step if we want to test the login functionality through email address and password. Correct?
Yes.
Second step. Step two would be enter the password in the password field. Step three would be click on the login button. Okay. Now, for now what? Deepen, any idea? What should be our next step?
The page should be open.
Okay. What page?
Mm, the Facebook page
Okay.
or whatever like data we are testing.
So where we should write that?
We should write that on the
Step four.
step 4.
Okay.
No, step 4 should be re-enter email. Are we creating a user ID password or we are just opening?
No, no, we are just opening. The test case here is verify,
Okay.
verify the.
Then click I agree with terms and conditions.
Why would we do that? Do we get the option to? Okay, let's assume that we have that option.
No,
That
if we are creating a new user ID or password, or if it
no,
is already created.
verify the login with email ID and password. That's our test case here.
Okay, so that means like we have already created user ID and password. The step 4 should be the page should be open.
Okay. Now, as you can see, the test case was verify the login and email. Verify the login with email and password. That's our test case. Okay. So by reading
Okay.
this header, we can understand that we just need to verify the login functionality, that too with the help of email ID and password. So we have already entered our email ID and password and clicked on the login button. So these are all the steps that were required. Okay.
Mhm.
Now we
Yeah,
just need to verify the expected result.
yeah. The page should be open
Yes.
is the expected result.
Yes. That's the expected result. Now we do have that actual result column with us.
It should be pass or fail.
Yes. No, not in the actual result. Expected result, we what is ideally that we want.
Page
That's
open.
yes. Now in actual result, what exactly happened after we clicked on the login button? In the status column, we'll
Mhm.
write either pass or you
Or
can
fail.
fail in the status column. Not in the actual result, we would write how exactly is the test case behaving. Like
Yes.
expected result was that it should open the home page. Now, after clicking on the login button, suppose it opens edit profile page. So that's not the correct behavior, correct?
Yes.
So in this case, our test case gonna fail.
Yes.
Why so? Because the expected result and actual result did not match.
Match. Yes.
That's the reason here. And
Yes. It's either the credentials are a mismatch, or maybe the user ID or password didn't match that
yes,
we generated.
yes, it can be due to any reason. Like, yes,
Yes.
as you correctly pointed out, that there might be a case also that email and password did not match. An actual result, instead of opening the profile page, the actual result was, please, username and password. Okay, please
Okay.
enter correct username and password. So that was the actual result. So in that case also our test case gonna fail.
Fail. Yeah.
So these are the basic content. And yes, there in some test cases you might require test data also. Correct?
Yes.
Like for this test case itself, you need the test data. So username like test at the rate. Now we'll go for password. It would be something like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this would be the test data itself. Okay.
Okay.
So these would be the content of a test case itself. Now, if we again discuss about the test scenario, its content is generally going to be a high level description. Like for this case, verify the login. Verify the login functionality. That's our
Scenario.
test scenario here. Are we clear about the difference and how exactly do
Yes.
we write our test case and test scenarios?
Yes.
Okay. Any confusions till now or any doubts anyone would like to ask?
For me, no doubts.
Okay.
Any other?
Okay.
No, I'm good.
Okay. In that case, we'll be moving towards the next point. Now, reusability may be reused in different scenarios, often referred to for grouping itself. As I mentioned, the test scenario basically refers to a particular functionality. For every functionality, we create a scenario. And yes, for few scenarios, there might be, I mean, in few scenarios, there might be certain test cases that do repeat itself for other scenarios as well. Like if I try to give you an example, let us assume that we created a scenario, verify the functionality of our website after login. Okay.
Okay.
And now we created a test scenario to verify the functionality of homepage button itself. So these are two different scenarios, correct?
Yes.
For the first scenario, we are verifying the entire functionality after login. For the second scenario, we are just verifying the functionality of the home button itself. Now, for both the scenarios, there would be a common test case. That would be the homepage button itself. Okay. As we are trying to verify the functionality after login. So after login, we would encounter at one point of time our homepage button itself, correct?
Yes.
So we need to test it as this scenario has a very broad scope. So we would be covering that homepage button test case in our login functionality scenario. I mean, the scenario in which we are testing the entire feature after login in that as well, and also in the home page button scenario. So in that case, the test case might, in this case, test case would be repeating, correct?
Yes. We can reuse those test cases that already written.
Yes, we can either reuse or you can write that same test case and just give it a proper identifier that yes, that test case 23 is same as the test case 54. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Because we need to make sure that we are covering every functional aspect.
Yes.
Now, coverage. Next point. Coverage. Address one specific behavior or scenarios. Covers multiple test scenarios. We have already discussed about this coverage itself. I guess you guys won't be having much of a problem here.
No.
Now, coming to the example part itself, testing user login with invalid password and testing the user registration process. So, testing the login with invalid password, it's basically you can say one part of the login scenario. Invalid, then you can test the second test case would be testing the user login with valid email and password. That would be the two different kind of test cases for testing the login scenario.
Yeah.
Okay. And now coming to this example, testing the user registration process. Now again, this point is not correct. User registration process would be the test case itself, not the test scenario here. So we need to correct this point here. So don't get confused. Test scenario, basically it's a high level detail, and it is mapped to a particular requirement itself or any particular functionality as a whole. And one test scenario must have minimum of one test case. Okay, every
Okay.
must have one test case. For each test scenario, we need to have at least one test case. And there is no limit for the maximum number of test cases that you can
Just Christmas.
have for a particular scenario, but there is a minimum requirement, that is one. And if by any chance you created any particular scenario for which you are not able to come up with any test cases, then there is something wrong with that test scenario itself. Okay, you need
Okay.
to rethink about that test scenario. And one more thing, if you are creating your test scenarios in such a way that your each test scenario has only one test case, then also it is not correct. Suppose, like, if i if I tell you guys to write the test cases for any particular functionality and test scenarios, so for that particular feature of for which you are writing the test scenarios and test cases itself, there are few scenarios in which there is only one test cases and few scenarios in which there are multiple test cases, then it is correct. But if you are writing that test cases and test scenarios in such a way that for each test scenario there is only one test case, for every scenario there is only one test case possible, then the test scenario formation is not correct that you are doing. Okay,
Okay.
and you just need to make sure that you do practice writing the test cases and test scenarios for any particular website that you want or any particular software that you like. Just try to come up with the test scenario and test cases and try to practice it. As much as you will practice, you will get better in creating test scenarios as well as the test cases. And if you do feel any kind of doubts, you just prepare that document with test scenario and test cases, and you can just email them to us and we'll verify it. If you are writing that correct, those test scenarios and test cases correctly or not, and if there is any scope of improvement, we'll communicate. Okay.
Okay.
Now, moving to the next point, how to write a test case. Now, writing a test case means outlining a clear sequence of steps, conditions, and input to check if an application works as intended. A well-written test case guides the tester through each test in an organized way and capture both the expected and the actual result for future use. So this is a typical definition of a test case itself. And as we had already discussed, that we need to capture both expected as well as actual result, just to make sure how exactly is the application or the software itself is behaving for our future references. So in future, if we are testing that same test case, and if the application does not behave like it was behaving earlier, we can raise an issue. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
And here are few components description. First, the test case ID. Test case ID basically helps us to uniquely identify each of the test cases itself. And these test case IDs comes in very handy when we are trying to manage those test case itself, because it gives us a serial number and we can easily refer to them. Like suppose we have created a test case, we have created multiple test cases for our project. Those test cases, suppose that there are 2000 test cases. Okay. And now, out of those 2000 test cases, there are 40 test cases that are currently failing, and we need to fix those test cases. So, how exactly we would be communicating it to the developers? We would just need to create an issue and provide them with the detailed steps on how they can replicate that test case itself. So for that, we can just go ahead and copy paste these steps from the test case itself and create an issue for them. But now after the issue has been resolved, we need to make the changes in our test script as well, correct? So that we have that in our records also, that those 40 test cases that were failing earlier due to any reasons have been fixed by the developers. It has been updated in the developers record as well as in testers record. So next time when we are trying to execute those 2000 test cases, we have on record that only these 40 test cases were failing, that too were fixed by the developers. So currently our project has no issues, correct?
Yes.
So if there are 2000 test cases and out of them 40 were failing, while executing, we would be able to figure out that these 40 test cases were failing. But if there is no identifier of each individual test cases, or if there is no ID for any test case, how exactly we would be mapping those 40 test cases in our sheet? We need some identifier to identify each test cases individually, correct?
Yes.
So that is the reason we use the test case ID. Now the test case description briefly describes what the test case will verify. This should be clear, concise statement that outline the purpose of the test. As we had already discussed about the description, scenario generally mapped to the functionality. Test case description basically gives us an idea what exactly are we trying to do here. It does not provide us the steps on how to do, but gives us the idea what exactly we are trying to achieve here. Like login to the website using correct email address and password. So it does not provide us how exactly we would log in, but it gives us the outline that yes, you need to log in. For this test case, you will be logging into the website using correct email address and password. Okay.
Okay.
So that is the purpose of test description. Preconditions. List of any condition that must be met before the test case can be executed. This might include specific system states, date setup, or configurations required. Whenever you are trying to execute any test cases, there are certain conditions that needs to be met before you can execute those test cases itself, as we had already discussed. Like if we talk about the login functionality test case that I wrote earlier, in order to execute that test case, the very basic requirement is that you need to have an internet connection, correct? Then only you would
Yes.
be able to navigate to the login page and make sure that yes, you are able to test the login function. So that is the first requirement. Second requirement, that you should be having a proper device. I mean, for whichever platform you are testing, be it a mobile device or be it a laptop or a computer itself. So you need to have that device. It might sound stupid that why do we need such obvious kind of precondition, but they are required. just to make sure that we are testing it in a proper environment itself. Okay,
Okay.
because when you do start testing, there might be few cases. I'll give you few cases that I have encountered during my journey as a tester. One time I was executing the same login functionality test case. Now I checked for the web version. It was working fine. I was able to log in with the email and password. So I thought that yes, it is working. So I just marked it pass. I did not verify the same for mobile device. Okay. I mean for the application. The software that I was testing has had two versions. First, it was for the website. You can just go to that URL and you can use the login functionality. There was a app as well in the App Store or Android App Store. So I thought that if I'm able to log in the web version, I would be able to log in the mobile device app version also without any problem. So I had that assumption in my mind and I marked the test case as pass. But you won't believe there was a issue with the mobile login only. Users were not able to log in the mobile devices with their email ID and password. So we had to raise a hot fix and send it to production. And the reason was I was not, I did not test it for the mobile devices. So preconditions are very necessary just to make sure that we are covering every aspect. Okay.
Okay.
Now test steps, the next point. List the steps for executing the test, including navigation step, how to reach to that feature or functionality being tested, input data, what data we need to be entered, action, what action does the tester needs to perform. While I was writing for the login functionality, you must have seen that I was writing step 1, step 2, step 3, actual and expected. Correct?
Yes.
That's how I wrote the test case itself. So that step 1, step 2 were the test steps. It was giving you step by step direction on how to execute a particular test case. So as a tester, we are sure that yes, we are able to execute those test cases without any hassle itself. Okay.
Okay.
Any doubts regarding test steps?
No doubt.
Okay. Rest of you are silent. Then I,
No, I'm clear.
if you guys are silent, I'll take the assumption that yes, you are able to understand. Now, the next point, expected result. Describe the expected outcome of the test if the application behave as intended. This clarifies what the tester should look for after executing the test steps. Actual result leaves the space for recording actual outcome to test the execution. This will be filled out during the testing process. So, as we had discussed earlier, expected result. It generally helps us to have, I mean, gives us the perspective what exactly would be the actual behavior. I mean, the generalized behavior or the correct behavior for that particular test case, how exactly the application should behave if we are following these test steps. That's what we write in the expected result. And how exactly is the application behaving right now? That we write in the actual result. Okay, and they might or might not be same. And depending upon the status of expected and actual result, we would be writing pass or fail. If they are same, then we give that pass status to that test case. If they are not same, then we give the fail criteria. Are we clear about the expected, actual, and pass fail criteria?
Yes.
Okay. Now,
Yes.
moving on to the next part itself. That's the test data now. List any data uses in the test, including input values, necessary setup information, ensures the test can be reproduced accurately. Now, test data itself, as I mentioned, for the login functionality, the test data would be username and password field, correct?
Yes.
So test data is whatever data or input that might be required from the tester while executing that test case itself. Okay. One example that we have already discussed is the login functionality. Second example, let us take that you want to verify the post functionality of our social media platform. Okay. And while
Okay.
posting anything, there is a condition. I mean, there is a requirement that you should not be able, that you are not allowed to post more than 180 characters. Okay.
Okay.
Now, in order to test that you are not allowed to upload more than 180 characters, we need a text that has more than 180 characters. Okay. By using boundary value analysis, we can come up with the number that is 181. Correct?
Yes.
So now, in order to execute that, we need a test data that has 181 characters. So while executing the test case itself, we won't write something and count the characters there. No? That yes, I would write a sentence or any random text that has 181 characters. It would be time consuming, correct?
Yes.
So what we do, we just have that test data column with us, and we would, while writing that test case itself, we would just paste any random text or a simple text that has 181 characters. And while executing that test case, we just need to go to that test data column and copy that text from the text data and paste it on our social media platform and try to post whether we are able to post that 181 characters or not. So that is what the purpose of test data is. Are we clear on it?
Yes.
Hmm. Now, coming to the next point, that is post conditions. Describes the state in which system should be left after the test execution, if applicable. This helps in understanding the system stability post the test. Now, if I give you an example about post condition, Deepan, do you have any examples with you?
Post conditions.
Yes. Any example that you would like to give?
No. Post conditions is like a status, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Like let's say I write a test case, open a Facebook account. That's the title.
Mm-hmm.
Precondition should be blank, and I start writing the test steps like open a start browser, enter URL, and the test data should be www.facebook.com.
Mm-hmm.
Expected results should be Facebook website should be open, and
Correct.
the actual result is the URL is open successfully,
Mm-hmm.
and the status like Facebook page open. It's post conditions.
The Facebook page open, why would that be the post condition? Does it not make more sense to keep that as the expected result? Or what should be the expected result in this test case that you mentioned right now? What should be the expected result?
Expected result is like once we enter the URL, expected result is Facebook website should be open.
And what would be the post condition then?
Then I might have mistaken somewhere.
Let me help you out here. So the example that you gave just now, it was correct. Okay, but you got confused with the expected result and the post condition. So let me explain. Now, considering the same example that you were giving, like suppose we are verifying the login functionality. Okay. Now,
Mhm.
after entering the same correct username and password, we are navigated to the home page itself. Okay.
Yes,
That would be our expected result. That home
yes,
should be displayed. Now, in the post condition, suppose that we do have a requirement for our website, for our particular social media platform, that if you remain inactive for 10 minutes on our social media platform, then by default,
it
you,
will be locked.
you will be logged out of your account.
Yes, yes.
Suppose that if there is this kind of a condition, then that would be the post condition.
Okay,
Okay. And if suppose there is no such condition, then you can say, then there might be like how the general Facebook works, that as soon as you log in, you won't be logged out, even if you remain inactive for few hours or even for a day or two, you won't be logged out of your account. Okay.
until and unless I logged out by myself.
Yes. Until unless you use the logout functionality, you won't be logged out. That would be the post condition
Okay,
for our current Facebook.
okay,
Okay. Now,
okay.
coming to the next section, that is notes or comments, includes any additional information that can assist in executing the test case, understanding its purpose, or interpreting its result. Like, suppose that there are few things that you figured out during the test case execution. Okay. And you need to make sure that, okay, these are the things that I figured out during the test case execution, and now I need to remember it so that I do not ask the same question next time if I'm executing the test case, or if someone else is executing the test case, then there is a very high possibility that that person might also have that same kind of a doubt, or say, or might encounter that same questions that you were having while executing that test case. So you need to make sure that if there is any such information here that you would like to pass on for the next testing iteration, then you should write that information in the notes section itself. Okay.
Yes,
Like, if we are testing the login functionality, and it generally takes more than 30 seconds to execute the login functionality on the testing environment, suppose. Okay. And while testing for the first time, you raised an issue that login takes more than 30 seconds in the testing environment. So fix it. Now you got the response back from the developers that in the testing environment, we are not giving that much amount of resources to our website. Okay.
okay,
We are not giving that much, heavy servers are not implemented in the testing environment. So the execution process would be a bit slow in comparison to the actual production. And when I say production, I mean the actual website itself when it is live for general public to use. So it was dependent on the environment, correct? There are different environments. I hope you guys have that understanding. testing environment and deployment, or the production. There are basically three types of environment: dev environment, testing environment, and production. Okay. Dev environment
Okay.
basically is the environment in which developers develop the software. That is called the dev environment. Second is the testing environment, the environment in which we as a tester test that software. That is called the testing environment. And once we are done with the testing and we do give them okay to go ahead and release that software, they would be releasing it. And when the software is released, it is released to the production environment where the client's gonna use that software. Okay.
Okay.
So these are the three kinds of environment. And yes, production can, there are many companies that does have two production. There is a staging environment, then there is a production environment. Generally, companies avoid using, avoid releasing it directly to the production. First, they would release to the staging environment just to make sure that everything is working in staging itself, and they would ask tester to do a sanity test on the testing environment, staging environment, just to make sure that the basic functionality is working, and whatever new functionalities we might have released, we need to test that also on the staging environment. And once the staging environment testing on staging is done, and we give them the good to go, then it is released to the production environment. Okay.
Okay.
So these are basically the four kind of environments that we have for the entire software development life cycle. Any questions about these four environments or any doubts that any of you might have? Stage,
No, not from my side.
testing, dev, testing, staging, and production. So yes, we were talking about nodes. So while testing in the testing environment, you encountered that login functionality takes more than 30 seconds to log in. You raised the issue, but the developer said that no, we can't fix it in the testing environment because we are not giving that much resource to our website in the testing environment. So the login functionality would be slow in the testing environment. But yes, you can test it in the staging environment or the production. Then login would take less than 5 seconds. Okay. Suppose the developer communicated this to you. Now, every iteration that you are trying testing the login functionality in the staging, you can't just go ahead and raise that same issue. No? Correct.
Yeah. Yes.
Because the developers, then he or she will be irritated. Why are you raising the same issue again and again after every iteration? I've already informed you once that for staging environment, we can't make that login time less than 30 seconds due to our resource constraint. So you need to make sure that you have that information with yourself, and your entire team or whoever executes that test case on this testing environment has that information. So in order to pass on that information, you can just mention it in the note section that for the testing environment, login functionality would be taking more than 30 seconds. You need to verify it on production whether login functionality is taking less than 5 seconds or not. If not, please raise an issue or something like this. You can make a short note and paste it in the note section. So whenever any new tester or even you are executing the same test case after 6 months or a year, you would be able to recall, okay, I had written this note section. Or even if I'm a new tester and someone else had written a note, so I can just go ahead and read that note and get an understanding. Okay. Yes, so testing environment, it is not possible to reduce the login time any less than 30 seconds. But for production, it is working correctly, so I can verify in the production. So are we clear about the notes and comment?
Yes.
Okay. Now the test case format itself. We have already discussed in detail, I guess, each and every section of each and every component of the test case itself. So any doubts, you can just quickly go through all these sections that you can see on my screen right now. And if you have any doubt regarding any of these sections, feel free to ask right now. I'll give you guys 10 seconds or take 30 seconds. Just go through each and every sections and let me know if you have any doubt. Are you guys done?
Yes.
Any doubts from any one of you?
No, from my side.
Okay. Rest of them.
No, from my side as well.
Okay. So now moving forward, test case writing and best practices that we need to inculcate. So we'll just be going through these points one by one. Crafting effective test cases is a skill honed on. I think you guys can read that on your own. There is nothing much to explain here. You just need to go through it and you'll get a basic understanding here. Test scenarios, I guess we had already covered it in details earlier, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So I don't think there is anything else left for us to discuss here. So any doubts regarding test case and test scenarios from you guys now? Any doubts that you might have? No. So,
No, from my side.
okay, sounds good. So we are done with the manual part.
I would like to share my screen to show that since there was a family emergency, I was unable to complete the whole assignment.
Mm-hmm.
But I tried to do some as per my like whatever time I got. I would like to share my screen with you.
Yeah, sure. Please go ahead. I almost forgot about that assignment. Oh, sorry from my end.
I had a family emergency, so I had to go to Ohio. Do you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, these are the test cases that I have prepared. The discussion that we had uh, about the Facebook test
Hmm,
case.
correct.
So these are the steps that I have followed, and some of them. Sorry, this is the one. This is the correct one.
Okay.
I went through the steps. I googled
Mm-hmm.
and I found this format, and this format was used by my previous instructor as well. So this is so familiar to me. So I used this. I made some modification on it, but
Okay.
I'd like you to go. Is my project name correct?
Yes.
And module is account login.
The spelling is
Test this.
incorrect of platform, but yes, project name
Yeah,
is
no,
correct.
this is platform. Sorry. Yeah,
No.
the account login and that's designed by myself.
Mm-hmm.
description, Facebook login, functions test,
Mm-hmm.
and created on Saturday. I got
Correct.
a little bit of time, so the test case one, two, three. I generated three test cases for that,
Mm-hmm.
and test case title is open Facebook account. Precondition I put here is user can see Facebook website open,
Correct.
and test steps are open and start browser, enter URL, and hit there. I mean, it's like click on the button. Maybe I can write a click on the button, right?
Yes.
I put the
Like,
test data here.
depend the steps that you wrote here, no? Open and start the browser, enter the URL and hit the enter button. Okay. So these are enough descriptive steps. You don't have to go through each, I mean, very basic details. You don't have to go through that. Okay. You just
Okay,
need to make sure that you write your test steps in such a way that even a layman or even a non-technical person, or even if someone think of someone who has never gone through any QA training, okay, and they would
okay,
be able to execute your test cases by reading the test steps. They should be able to execute. Okay, so whenever you write any test steps, you should keep that in mind, that any
okay.
person, any random person from a non-technical background is able to execute those test steps without much of a hassle.
So do I have to remove this? Hit enter. Just
No, no, no,
enter the
no. It's
this.
absolutely correct. You have written it
Okay,
correctly. So
okay.
go
And
ahead.
the test data I put it is the website page here,
Correct. Yes, that
and
is.
the expected result should be Facebook website should be open.
Hmm.
And I tested their actual result URL is open successfully,
Mm-hmm.
and the status I put is Facebook page opened again.
Status generally depend what status reflects is either pass or fail. You have already mentioned that in the actual result column, that URL opened successfully.
So I
Or
don't have to put anything here.
in status column, you should generally we should put either pass or fail, not
Okay,
Facebook page is opened. Facebook page is opened, you can put that in the actual result column if you want to describe it in bit of detail. That
okay,
just go through your expected result, what your expected result says.
yeah, right here.
just just give me a second, I'm getting a call.